You're watching another supercharged masterclass with Jordan Samuel Fleming. Your opportunity to learn the ins and outs of Podio design and development from one of the top Podio partners in the world.
Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Supercharged. I'm your host, Jordan Samuel Fleming, here to talk all about the power of workflow and automation when your business is powered by Podio. Well, in episode 3, I gotta be honest, it's a bit of a Geek Squad moment. I have on this episode 3 guests. Number 1, Seth Helgeson. He's the CEO of ThatApp.io and TECHego. Long time Podio partner and a really technically proficient company, right? It's a company that really goes into the deep stuff. We're going to be reviewing some of his extensions on the wearegamechangers.com site fairly soon. I've also got Damien Ruggieri. Damien is the CEO of REI Solutions, and they've got a real estate wholesale custom system in Podio that they sell called Deal Pro. And Damien has a lot of expertise of building things in and out of Podio and linking them together. And then, of course, we've got Andrew Cranston, who at the time of recording this was the CEO of Game Changers and is now the CEO of his own Podio consultancy that's grown from Game Changers called Syncrony, which, of course, all the links will be in the podcast descriptions. This is a bit of a Geek Squad moment, I'll be honest. You get these 3 talking and you get very deeply into technical things, but it's also really interesting, and there's some really interesting nuggets here that will expand. If you're at all technical, if you're kind of moving your Podio development into a more technical range, there's a lot in here that will give you some really good ideas and information. This is definitely one of those you want to look at on YouTube as well, because they do share their screens and show some things which are really very cool. As always, when these 3 get together, I'm sort of, I sit there to curse in the background occasionally because these guys know far more technical stuff than me. It's fascinating chance to listen to 3 amazing Podio partners deep dive into some more technical things you can do around Podio. Let's have a listen. The last season of the podcast, the Podio has launched a few things. Let's start off. I'll be introducing you guys on the intro to the podcast anyway, but very, very quickly before we launch into it, can I get everybody to give a 10-second introduction, starting with Damien?
Yep. So my name is Damien Ruggieri. I am the owner of REI Solutions. We make really awesome CRMs for Podio and Podio users.
Pretty good. Andrew.
I am Andrew Cranston. I am the CEO of Game Changers, and we do Podio work for people all over the planet.
And Seth.
Yes, I am Seth Helgeson with TECHego, the CEO of TECHego, and we do workflow automations, and we also have some extensions called Print, Sync, and Ava that we help build out these custom Podio systems for clients.
Absolutely. So today's episode, kicking off this season, it's a bit of a partner roundtable, and we're going to start out by talking a little bit about some of the changes since last that have happened in Podio since the last season of the podcast. Namely, I'm going to start out with the new UI. So it launched to big fanfare, naturally. I was really unconvinced. I got to say, though, just to their credit, every time I switch back to the old UI now, I twitch and I'm like, oh, God, look at this fucking thing. So it sort of won me. Now, am I happy that they haven't done more? Like, I wanted more substantive things in terms of the platform. Yes, I'm not happy about that. But in terms of the new UI, I'm kind of there now. What does everybody think?
Yeah, at first I was kind of going, what is going on? Are we jumping back to the 70s, the seafoam blue? I mean, could we not have gotten something better? I mean, good heck. And then they came out with, I think it was Andreas Hutteresh came out with a Chrome extension that kind of like muted some of the colors and made it a bit better. And then one profile had it, the other profile didn't. And so switching between the two all of a sudden now I've become acclimatized to it. I love the font. The color is not as aggressive as it was in the beginning, and yeah, I guess that's okay.
Yeah, that Podio, the super menu extension, that's what you're talking about. It's safe.
Mhm.
It definitely makes it viewable. I would say it was when it first came out, for me, it was almost like, man, this is terrible. I can't focus with how this color scheme is. But now it's kind of same thing as everyone else. It's grown on me. Just kind of.
Well, it hasn't grown on you because you have to not make it grow on you. So I don't actually use Andre. I tried Andreas's thing, but I'll be honest, I've gotten very used to the UI, the new UI, and I'm fine with it. Like I mean, I'm not in love with the teal or the whatever that sky kind of weird aqua sky blue, but but in general, now that when I go back to the old system, to the old UI, I'm kind of like, oh God, this looks horrible. This looks old and shitty. So they kind of won me over with it. Andrew, what do you think?
That would be a significant switch going from new. If you were in new for a while, going back to old is kind of funky. I mean, to be not just like 3 out of 4 recommend. It's just for me that I fell in love with this CSS hack through a Chrome extension called Stylish that we turned a bunch of people on, mostly because the markdown tables that you build in calculation fields look kind of cool with it. And it's weird because I use Sessionbox also, and sometimes I'm in other systems and it's like this CSS hack is superimposed somehow over the new UI, and there it truly looks terrible. Like sometimes, and I just haven't bothered to go in and reconfigure, but sometimes it looks terrible. But in my Podio, my own pure Podio, regardless of the new UI, it remains looking the same. So I haven't moved from. I'm quite comfortable with the way my Podio looks right now. I don't want to necessarily use new UI. I thought I had to. I thought there was a point where I was going to have no choice, but fingers crossed. It seems like.
Yeah.
I think there is, but
there will be.
But yeah,
oh no, I'm
like
sure it'll happen at some point. Yeah,
delayed.
I thought it already came out. It was already forced upon us.
Me too. I thought, yes.
I think it's grandfathered.
I have the link that says switch to new look.
Yeah.
I still have the option to go back and forth. So maybe that's because we're beta users. I don't know.
I think it's grandfathered. I think I suspect they've done. I suspect they've done what we've done on smartphone a couple of times, which is if you're already existing, we'll give you the option for a little while, but all new accounts go straight to the new thing. You know, that would make sense because otherwise you'd be going to new accounts in a very jarring way and being like, kidding. And before they even get used to Podio, you'd switch that over. So it's probably grandfathered. I'm going to guess.
I do like it though. I think it's nice. I'm used to the way I use it now, but the blue, Andreas's blue, definitely makes a huge difference for me personally. But other than that,
try that
I
again.
think I like the views. I do like the font, Seth. I have to agree with you there.
Yeah, it just feels a little. It just feels, it just feels a little fresher. Now, they've also, let's just quickly go over. I mean, since the last season, they have done. You know, it does feel, as critical as I often am of Podio and Citrix, it does feel like they're at least actually moving for the first time.
Right, like actually doing something.
Yeah,
you look at some of the boards where things are 8-9 years old. Like, holy shit, we still haven't done this.
Yes. There's huge improvements, I think, in that regard. I've been so happy to see, calc improvements have been noticeable. There's been, I don't trust that when they say, hey, we're going down for maintenance, that to me, my gut tells me, well, I guess the next day is going to be sucky. Yeah. I know the next day is still going to suck. For whatever reason, they don't tell us what they're going to be doing, but for some reason it creates a cluster F of epic proportions that reverberate through the system.
Yeah. Definitely agree with you, man. Like, it's almost like they do the down for maintenance and that's like when they're testing it out. There's no pre-test of the push that they're doing. So I think that was relevant for everybody in the last couple of weeks as we've seen some down for maintenance and then like you're saying, Seth, back up, and it's like, oh man, now all this doesn't work.
Yeah, it's been rather frustrating in that respect.
Calculation fields have gotten better on the whole overall. In recent past, there's some instances, and God bless that red dot in Supermenu that I feel
fucking
like
thing's always on.
Well,
we mean God bless the red dot. It's like,
well, no, I suppose it's too much to ask that Citrix personnel would be using better Supermenu to see that red dot, but at least it raises the overall ire of the Podio ecosystem and its users to try to, they probably get a lot more support tickets now than they ever did. I hope they get more support tickets than they ever did based on that red light. But personally and professionally, I have kind of divorced myself from calculation fields altogether. I sort of tell people they're there for convenience purposes, but obviously in a situation where you've got Sync and you've got Ava and you've got solutions that can gather data together. Most of the time, if you think about the ways people are using calculation fields, markdown tables, fine. But the related items at the bottom are not terrible. It's just, it's convenience, right? But they're there for convenience. If you're in one of these rare situations where the fields are not producing, you could still get to the right answer. But people who put their life in reporting and financial calculations and things where calculation fields have to be correct, there's better ways to gather that data, either to display to the user or for additional workflows. And I don't rely on calculation fields at all.
Let's follow that rabbit hole, actually, because I would agree with you in the sense that let's talk about what happens, or what would we say as partners is the best method to work with things like, let's say financial reporting, where you have to have accurate fucking data, right? Where it is simply just not acceptable to, oops, these transactions aren't showing because the calculation field didn't resolve. Like that. That's just like, that's probably how the government does their books, but that's not how we should do our books. So, what are the options that people would be looking at? What are the best options to make sure that that they can get around the time when calculations do go down? Are we calling that like just pure number fields and then populating that data through something like GlobalFlow or Ava? Hey, are you using Podio to manage your real estate investment business? Wait! Click the link to find out why thousands of real estate investment professionals are using Podio Plus smartphone to make more calls, send more text, and close more deals. Click the link.
I find it I know some partners, like we have these monthly partner meetings and we talk about strategies and things. And I know there are partners who are relying on the idea of updating an item every day using GlobalFlow just to push calc fields. I personally find that to be a very hacky solution and not something that I would stake my life on, and certainly not financial records. It's funny because I have a client who we discovered a calculation field that somebody programmed in the current date, expecting the calculation field to always know what the current date is, but we all know that that's not the reality or how the fields work. So I can, Seth can maybe pick this up, but again, like using SQL or using Ava and gather Sync and then gathering data from Ava, it's all JSON anyway. Most people are getting Podio views and creating their own groups of data, or they're calling JSON endpoints, to get their own data. So
that's a very technical, like if we were going to talk about I'm using Podio, what are my options?
Yeah.
I don't think the average Podio user goes, oh, it's all just JSON.
Don't aggregate your data in Podio. Use other tools to aggregate it. That's basically
exactly.
Yeah.
We've come up with trying to do something similar, because with Sync, we back up all the data. We've got all the relationships, and we're rolling out the new relationship values. So you could pull an API call from GlobalFlow and pull over 1,000 or 2,000 or however many items you've got for those relationships. But since we've got all those the calc relationships, we've been trying to look at, can we build a function that can take that raw JSON data in a MongoDB database and run those calcs again, right? And run those calcs and update the value in MongoDB, because Podio doesn't do those push notifications. And we just haven't had the time and resource or even interest, because it's not something that customers are going, hey, my calc data is wrong. Well, sure, we could correct it in MongoDB, but we can't correct it in Podio, right? We can't push those updates that we see. If we see that we're actually, okay, we're correct in Sync and MongoDB, but we push it into, we can't push it, right? We can't push
modify template, add a space, save.
There you go. Yeah, and
that's
pray.
That's not
right?
a long term. That's not a solution.
Yeah,
exactly. That's not long.
Is that still the only way you can?
Yeah.
The only way to trigger updates in calculation fields, save them or change one of the fields that relate to them.
Oh,
yeah,
Jesus.
and one thing that we've looked at is, if a customer to say, hey, we're going to run our portal on top of Sync, and we need these calcs to be accurate, then we would build that function to
or
reporting
accuracy. Or somebody who's using like a Clipfolio or a Google Data Studio or Overview. Anybody who's looking for advanced reporting or just gathering it's either technical, gather the data specifically for further use, or it's aggregating the data. Either way, the
in
solution.
That sense,
The overall basic solution of using like a months app and gathering everything through relationships in Podio and using calculation fields. I'm here to tell you that I started there myself, and it went really, really bad like 3 years in. So,
but what about what if you've got say you've got a campaign app and you're pushing and you're linking. I mean, we all have worked with real estate in the past, or continue to work with real estate investors. And so a lot of people will have a properties app and dispositions app, or, a buying and selling app, et cetera, where you're essentially linking both sides of a thing, of a deal to a one campaign, including maybe all the offers you send as well, in order to calculate up the requisite information. Now, historically, most people would just immediately put a calculation field and do a sum of, or whatever that average of, or whatever, and then hope that it all works. Your options, if you do want to do that kind of app, are essentially either, if I'm correct, then are essentially either you replace calculation fields with number fields and let something else populate them that is more reliable than a calculation field. So you're essentially, every time, some things happen, we're refreshing that data, manually dropping in, or not manually, but some other system, whether it's Globiflow or Ava, is dropping that data in instead of calculating up. Is that correct?
Yeah, but by getting rid of those calc fields, for enterprise level systems, for those big financial reporting systems, and when you're sending out client invoices and billion dollar companies are saying, well, we need these invoices to be 100% accurate and all these calculations to be correct, then when there is a slowdown and it's a mess up and business has to continue on, we're seeing a lot more customers leaving workflow automation and starting to convert the stuff over to Ava because it's not affected by the down, those kind of bog downs. But we're starting to replace those calc fields with actual text, and then doing those calculations externally, and then putting those values into hidden fields that are then pulled into calc tables that are shown and displayed.
But the actual math is being done somewhere reliable, essentially, is what we're saying.
Exactly.
To make sure that it's drawing the right data, it's doing the right calculations, and it's dropping the right data back in.
When it's mission critical enterprise level stuff, you have to have a backup for that. And I mean, you can still have the calc field, but it's good to, you could have the calc field, but then you still have the manual processing of that, the math as a litmus.
Okay, interesting. But I mean, going back to our start, we have seen improvements on the calculation front.
And just to add one more flavor to this, really the issues that we're talking about are issues of scale, not to scare off small Podio users.
I
think people who have smaller chains of related items will find great success in whatever they do using calculation fields, or using them at times when you're aggregating data, but then the aggregation stops. Sometimes fields that are constantly working to gather the data. If you do a report and you create a bunch of items, the calc field on a good day, the calc field captures the answer, and then the answer is static for life. Those are all still good situations. Really, I think we're looking at businesses who are using Podio at scale, and and one other, like people who have chains of data where one item, like a project or a campaign, perhaps, are gathering thousands of items and relating themselves to them. And then the person saying, well, I want to run KPIs on these thousands of related items. These are things when you really need to look outside the box.
Yeah.
So same as if you're doing that kind of reporting, like in the real estate realm, when you've got clients that have multi-space setups, to try to rely on something that's updating a calc field from that kind of setup, it's just, I've tried it. It doesn't work well. It's always a disaster. So we just do external stuff, like Andrew and Seth have been saying. You can't do it based on a calc field. It's just not going to work out. But
at scale.
Yeah, at scale. At scale is the
opinion.
key. Yeah, scale is the key term there.
Well, yeah. One other thing that I have noticed that it does affect the calc fields, and there's a lot of people don't think it helps, but I've actually found that there is a good reason to use it, and that is clean up deleted, that cleanup button under the modify template. A lot of people are like, oh, it doesn't really work, but those big apps that get really, really big, I've noticed that when I'm pulling down, trying to pull down, it used to have issues where we couldn't pull down more than 10,000 records. And I put this in employee chat, or in our partner bar chat, where you couldn't pull down 10,000 items and without it's saying 504 gateway error. And then suddenly with all these updates and improvements, now all of a sudden we're able to pull down so much more data. But sometimes we'll come across these apps that still get these gateway errors, and these apps have 400 plus fields in it. And doing that cleanup, I found that it does clean up the deleted fields. It does clean up the values. It wipes out all these empty values that still exist, and suddenly calcs start processing a lot faster. And it's like it does a refresh for the system. And I've recommended to Podio in the past, like, when we hit that cleanup button, can we just do a full refresh and reset all the external IDs to the current labels, right? What the current label is, instead of it being -2, -6, or and all these misspellings. Can we just do that kind of a refresh on the app too? But no dice on that front. But that cleanup button really is another option when you have apps that are completely bogged down with old junk.
It's like a weight loss. It does clean the house on the app actually pretty well. And I don't think a lot of people know it exists. I think an awful lot of people don't realize that app, that little button exists. And if you've gone through, particularly if you're new to Podio and you've done one of these build-in apps where you add fields, minus fields, subtract fields, add fields, subtract, if you're relatively new to Podio, I remember when I first started out, and this is not as long as you, Seth, but it's longer than I suspect anybody else here. When you're first starting to learn Podio and you're like, ooh, and then you build
all this cool stuff.
Well, yeah, you build this big thing, and then you're like, oh no, this is terrible. And you shrink it down, and then and you do all that. I found that that little button of just clear the shit out, please.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. It is a kind of a secret weapon that very few people I think know about.
Yeah, and that's another thing is that people don't realize that you can still, like your automations, if you delete a field that contains values and say yes, delete all existing values in that field, sure, it says it's deleting it all, but your automations, if you don't update your automations, it's still going to write data to a deleted field, and it will still show up in the app, but you can't edit it. But and same thing with category fields. You start making all these changes to category fields and messing around with that, and the whole system's just a disaster. But this one app that I was having troubles with, it had 300,000 items in it. I have a saved view of a rolling 7, basically anything that's updated, created, or edited in 7 days. In the past 7 days, that's what I pull and I sync, for some customer data on. And when I click that cleanup button, it ended up editing 58,000 records of 300,000 records in the app. And you're going, whoa, holy cow, this. And sure enough, one of their automations was writing a 0 value to a deleted field.
Like categories, you got that ghost category to show up, some random
Yeah.
option that you haven't had in 2 months.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'd be interested to see if you guys have problem apps, to hit that cleanup button to see if that helps to clean things out.
And
It definitely, calculations for me, I just find it takes time. It's like you expect it to happen right away, but the bigger the app, the longer it takes. It does work for me most of the time. I've had a couple of instances where it doesn't, but it's mostly the time it takes to do it.
Yep.
For anybody that's new with the Podio setup, that's going to be, you have to go click the little wrench on the app. That's where you can get to a lot of the different things if you're new navigating Podio. And it just says clean up deleted values, and click it. And then again, like everything else with Podio, you got to type it in there, clean up, and confirm that you want to clean up the app.
Yeah.
But when you hit that button, you'll see just how many values you're cleaning up.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's shocking. Sometimes you're like,
oh,
I let this app go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Part of those other part of those other maintenance things you might want to look at for users that are out there that might have those bigger apps is, we try extensions, like we log in, we try this, or we'll try this extension, and we don't realize how many webhooks get installed on our apps. And actually going to the developer tab and saying, oh, okay, I don't need these webhooks, and actually deleting them. One of the features in Sync is when you back up your data, you can actually go and say, okay, here we have all of your hooks, and we call it hooker killer. But the hook killer, you can actually take a URL and it will go through every app and every field as well, and actually delete all the webhooks from your system that match that criteria. So it's those type of maintenance things under our audit might be able to help as well to clean up some of those. Because every time you do an update or create, you're going to have maybe six or 7 different extensions coming in and grabbing items and pulling them out.
I don't think that necessarily, like if you had 100 webhooks on an app, I don't think that influences how the app works, does it?
My OCD tells me it does.
Because I'm curious if it's a good question though. I'm curious if you did have 100. I mean, certainly for that too, I agree with you. But if you had 100 webhooks on an app, I'm curious, does Podio fire them in order? Do they kind of all go at once? Do they get queued? Like if you had webhooks that were more important to you near the bottom, more recently added webhooks, do they get treated? I've never seen more than like 20.
Yeah.
And most of them are the result of extensions, like you said, that you install. But still, it's an interesting question. I don't know the answer.
Yeah. And lastly, one thing I don't think a lot of people know about is that you can actually trigger automations off of calc field changes in the workflow tool. Did you guys know that? I came across a customer yesterday that he was like, I had no idea. If you actually go into any app and you click on not the workflow automation button, but the workflows button, and click on app update, or like, for example, update, you can select a field and you actually can select a calc field in there. And if the value changes, or if it goes from nothing to something, like, for example, I set up an email, like if this customer hasn't been seen in 15 days, just send an email with this text. And if that calc all of a sudden appears with that, then it triggers and then I have it setting a category field that then triggers the app or triggers the workflow. So that workflow tool is one way to also track if calcs are updating inside of your system too.
I've never let's call it 7 years, almost 7 years of doing Podio. I've never once heard someone recommend or describe a use for the Podio workflow tool. So that's a record. That's amazing.
Really?
No,
I use it all the time.
no way.
Yeah.
Can you
So
describe other ways? Well, first, so what you're saying is that if you program a workflow in Podio, which again is on the wrench for those of you who are interested, and you say if a calculation field is changes, it sets off that workflow.
Yeah. So when that calc field changes and it, I have it set as for example, a user hasn't been seen in 60 days. They want an email going out to that user saying, hey, please log back in or we're going to remove you from this workspace. And so I set up a calc field that says, okay, if the date is 60, so every day it updates and says, okay, this is the now date. And when it hits 60 or above, this text field then shows up saying, okay, now send this text. And once that calculation field appears, it changes, then this workflow triggers based on the calc field change. And I have it updating a button that basically says trigger email. And that email then triggers Ava that then goes and says, oh, I'm going to go send this email, go get the item. Now, what email am I sending? Log into space, blah, blah, blah. And it sends it and then comes back and sets it down. So it's just a way to have a calc field triggering workflows.
Yep. I just opened up the workflow because I haven't opened that thing up in I can't even tell you how long. I can't even tell you how long. And yeah, geez.
I use this to set.
It looks like the filters are very limiting. Looks like you can only filter if statements on category fields. It seems like to me.
I think that most don't use it though because it's just there's better tools out there. Ava.
Exactly. I use it to set item ID fields. Like if I need an item ID set inside the app, I'll set up a workflow real quick and say whenever a new item is created, set the item ID inside this field instead of setting up something else. Because then I'm just using free Podio resources instead of me actually having to set up these stupid automations.
I used to use this back in the day when GlobyFlow limited the amount of flows you were allowed to have. Citrix Podio workflow automate, whatever, fucking GlobyFlow.
Yeah.
There used to be that your tier that you were on before Citrix bought it would determine how many flows, not only how many actions you were allowed per month, but how many flows you were allowed to have in your system as well. And at that point, with some of our more cost-conscious clients, and you were on a tier that only allowed you, I think, like 100 flows or something, it suddenly became any flow that just does an update item ID or update this one easy thing is actually valuable. It was like, am I gonna waste one of my few fucking flows on updating this? Days. And so I used to use this workflow tool to do those really simple things because it can't do anything more than simple things. But it was really good at just like if this happens, create a task for so and so. Out. Yep. It was really good at that. It's funny because I asked Sarah once on a podcast about that kind of inbuilt workflow, and I was like, why the fuck is that there? Like I sort of was like, why is this there? And she's like, and I think the answer was, well, we were working on our own, and then Andreas built GlobyFlow. And we were like, God damn it, this is much better. And then they bought it.
I really hope that they never get rid of that because that's one thing that is just such a huge benefit for me. I mean, it's so huge of a benefit in that respect because you're able to control so many of your calcs and you can set up some pretty great flows in that respect to trigger calculated on an item, right? So that's another option. You can set set that up that when this field updates, simply update this category field to processed, right? Or something of that nature. If you're going to be doing a massive update on an app and you want to put in a category field there to say, okay, I'm going to be processing this update, but I need to know where it stopped at or if it stopped. Now I can actually create a filter and make some adjustments to that and reprocess from there. You've got some additional leverage and options to do something like that.
Huh. Well, we all, it's every day's a school day, including for me.
Can't say that I'm going to jump in and use that though. But yeah, cool trick to learn, you know.
But going back again to try to close that loop, 2 weeks ago, or maybe it was 3 weeks ago now, we had obviously a significant event on webhooks in general. And again, I don't care about calculation fields, but I do care about webhooks.
Yep.
And other than that event and a couple of other events that are very small in number, thank God, over the past 14 months, I have seen literally no, and maybe Seth can even speak to this because he sees it on a much larger scale, but I've seen no interruption in webhooks. Even while GlobyFlow was slow, even while calc fields were slow, hooks are still chugging along. I've had very few errors when it comes to receiving and processing hooks from Podio overall. And as long as that continues in that fashion, I'll deal with UI problems. I'll deal with calc problems. Like as long as the API is doing its job, you know, you get a random 500 error and you have to ask why. But other than that, like that's the part that I feel really good about as a Podio developer over the past year in general.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You've definitely seen a marked improvement over the last
in webhook efficacy and speed. Yes, 1000%. Yeah.
Yep.
Other than 4 straight days in a row.
Well, yeah, but 3 years ago, Podio went down for 48 hours. And
no,
Yeah.
exactly.
We all had a heart attack until those clicks started happening again. I remember when that first Podio click went back, and I was like, "Oh God, my baby!"
If now everything's all messed up.
If Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp can go down for 6 hours straight, everyone is nobody safe, you know.
Well, the webhook thing, I mean, on a smartphone, from a smartphone hat, the webhook thing fucks us when that happens. I mean, slowdowns to the webhooks is just a disaster.
The speed sucks for sure. Yes,
yeah, it's just a disaster when the webhooks slow down or something like that, because then everybody complains that X isn't happening. And you're like, well, don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, trying to get people to understand that, you know, from just like a general user perspective, when you try to, like, I have clients that, well, hey, you know, this isn't happening. You know, I clicked the button 20 minutes ago. Like, hey, man, like, here's the status page. Here's the big error they have. Like, I can't make it work. Can't make it do it until, you know, the Podio gods come down and say, all right, webhooks are back.
People can save an enormous amount of money in development and overhead costs by adopting Podio as their system. They could save an enormous amount of overhead costs by adopting Asana as their system, Trello, any of these other systems. You know, Podio is obviously the best solution for the most possible number of permutations you could use it for, but you're still putting your life in a SaaS system, and you have to accept that as a, you know, you don't own the infrastructure.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to escape it.
I'm sure Salesforce goes down on occasion as well.
Oh, fucking Twilio does. Twilio, which is worth, I don't know how much at this point. You know,
couple dollars.
Yeah, I mean, Twilio will go down, and, you know, calling or texting will go down, and there is literally nothing we can do about it. And so our entire system essentially halts. And there is nothing we can do about it. And there's no way of letting people understand it's not our fault. Because, of course, we're the point of, you know, they bought us. They didn't buy Twilio. They don't know what the fuck Twilio is. So any SaaS system can go down. But the benefit, you know, I mean, how often that really happens, when you think about it, when you think about all these systems and all these servers and all these connections and all these processes and all the things that happen on a second by second basis, it's actually remarkable that the cloud infrastructure deals with the shit it deals on a daily, minute, second basis. Like, it's actually remarkable. Okay, hands up who's using Podio for real estate and they don't want more leads. Nobody. You want more leads closed? Well, check out Smartphone for Podio, the only phone system fully built for Citrix Podio. With an fully integrated power dialer and our amazing mobile apps, it means wherever you are, you can make more calls, log to Podio, send more texts, log to Podio, and close more deals, all logged to your Podio CRM. Click the link. Check it out. not to
99.9. It's not 100, but it's pretty damn good. It's pretty damn good. You said before, like GlobiFlow gave you 100 flows, which is actually, pretty mind-bending when you think about it, to go back in the day. But also like 20, like 5,000 actions a month. And you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do with these 5,000 actions? And now it's the wild, wild west to the tune of billions. They said the B word, billions of actions per month being run through GlobiFlow. And, it's not necessarily a great thing because we can see some evidence of it not being a super great thing, but it is amazing, even at 99.9%, how GlobiFlow just doesn't barf on a more regular basis. The fact that it only barfs when it does is truly a miracle.
Yeah. And one thing that I wish that they would implement and actually teach people about is if they could implement field level hooks to cut down on the number of webhooks that they receive and have to process, that would lighten the load so much. Because then it gives the user control to say, I only trigger an update to all these flows when this category field or when this value changes in this field, period.
Like, don't look at the whole thing.
Yeah. Don't, every time I update something, don't trigger a GlobiFlow. So I have to have a sanity check in 15 different, 15 different flows.
Yeah.
Well, just doing a select statement, asking for a Podio item, but only give me XYZ fields. Right? Because they're saving on bandwidth. We're getting items by the hundreds, thousands that contain markdown tables and section headers and navigation calculation fields and everything else that I don't care about. Yeah. That's just making it more difficult for me to gather what I need. So field level hooks, but also, give me the item. You're still going to get the item. You're going to get the hook for this item. You have the item ID. Your next as a dev, your probably next call is to get the item. But if you're doing that a lot, like Ava or like Sync is and these other tools, being able to cut down on shit that I don't know if there's any like field specific. Could a user in Sync go in and say, I don't care about fields X, Y, and Z, just Sync ABC?
No, we get the whole collection, but back in the day, in the beginning, there was documentation in the API of how you could, what type of response you want to get, and there's the micro, and it gives you reduced, and then you can actually in the get item filter call. And I was actually going to ask your help for this in a moment, actually after this call, Andrew. But there's a get item filter call. Where you're able to define the fields you want and return it in the micro format, and it removes out all the created by, it removes out all the JSON and all this stuff. And I have that formatting, but they did remove all that documentation of how to structure those queries to get that micro formatting of the API.
I'm not a fan of the micro formatting because so a relationship field, for example, you have a relationship field and you set the layout so that it shows what it shows. It could be the top field of that related app. It could be any other field or some combination. So when you get the when you get the reduced version of the item, you get the name, you get that name that the person would see. You don't get the item ID or the item IDs, which as a developer is what I really want. So I don't find a lot of benefit in getting the reduced item. But what I'm trying to do here is actually just look at, I know what you're talking about. There is a call in the Podio API. I can share my screen here. A call in the Podio API called filter items. That's really your best bet for getting items out of an app other than get Podio view or search, which is limiting, right? So I use this for import purposes where I can basically import 500 items at a time in a big app. Now I have some automation here, but even in my sort of like manual API where I can get 500 items at a time and keep fiddling with the offset 0, 500, 1,000, 1,500 to cycle through all the items. It works great. I get them all. Apps with a lot of fields take forever. Right? So I don't like, this is the only call that I'm aware of other than views and search and that, where you can get large groups of Podio items out of an app. But I don't see any options. Like, I don't know that there's anything here that allows you to.
Yeah. So I just posted in the chat a query that I was using yesterday. and it's for that view. If you want to share that chat screen, since you've already got it pulled up, you can display the chat.
I got to, I don't know if I can display the chat, but I can do this while I'm sharing my screen.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, perfect.
So that's the call to filter.
And it's items view micro.
Oh, micro. Okay.
And then
fields.
And
see, the documentation doesn't say anything about
exactly. It doesn't show micro or and mini. There's micro, mini, and full. And
okay, look at that. So you're only getting a certain group of fields.
Yep.
And you're choosing on a field by field basis which one comes back as micro and it comes back as. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Something tells me after this there'll be a little bit of it more technical.
Yeah. So what was interesting though is when I tried to run this, I have my developer in England. He was able to pull this and he was able to run it even using my credentials. Using his credentials. When I try to run this query via the API, via Postman, it errors on me. It tells me I'm unauthorized. I'm like going, WTF? Why is that? So I was going to actually see if you could help me if it errors on you as well, Andrew.
Might be the big Podio thing with the trust levels, the random things that you can't pull back without having the level 2. You can't get app hooks or any of that kind of stuff. So
that may be worth doing a little post on somewhere to let people know, like let the developer community know about that. I mean, I don't think if you didn't know about Andrew, I sure shit didn't know about it because I don't build anything in Podio anymore. But I mean,
so Seth is building a query that includes a key value pair called fields, but the documentation would not have you believe that you could pass an array called fields because it's not in the documentation. So
yeah, exactly.
Does that mean they're taking it out completely? Like, has there been any update, by the way, on the? Has we heard anything from Citrix about the change they're trying to make to the external link?
No,
I think she did post. Sarah did post something about that. That they're gonna allow people that already have it to continue to use it, right? And you just have to give people that little notice that this could be unsecure.
Thank fuck.
Yeah,
just the idea of having to rebuild all that shit across all those systems.
I think enough people said something. Yeah,
the old flows still work, but the new, when you go in to create an external link flow, the URL is formatted in the new fashion. So actually what I didn't try is just whether or not I could create a new external link flow, but feed it an old L parameter. That's what the base 64. I should test that and see, because I still need to be able to use it from a new, sure, my old stuff works fine, but I want to keep using the same process that I'm using for the future as well. Right. So
just guys, just to round out the podcast, because I like to keep these relatively short so that people don't, it's not a marathon. I mean, we're going to do another just for some people listening, we're going to do another group podcast in the first sort of 5 episodes of this season. Again, another group partner podcast, but we're going to focus on the sort of getting started tips and tricks, kind of the new ideas that we've got for when we're helping people get off the ground. This one is fun because it's a chance for these 3 guys to geek out and me to listen. But because this is, because I have talked about kind of the developments of Citrix, and what they've managed to put in. I'm in 2 minds right now, and I'm curious to finish this podcast, hear from you guys. On the one hand, I believe Podio is now back on the Citrix product page. I believe, which is like, why the fuck it wasn't there, I don't know, but that's good. And we've seen development of the platform again. Whether we like all the things they've developed or not, we've seen development on the platform again. And we've seen an increase on the team, including on support. Like, again, whether we've always had 100% successful interactions or not, we have seen that development. We've seen movement in Citrix, which I think is hugely positive. On the flip side, we've got a new investor group coming in and taking it private. So, and this is, for those of you, we're recording this on the 8th of February, 2022. That happened about a week ago-ish.
Yeah.
The notification came out. Yeah. So, I mean, I see positives right now. then we also have this. What's the gut feeling in the room here? Just out of curiosity.
My first initial reaction was the TECHego software is heavy automation, enterprise level automation, and data science reporting. Very, very big on that in that realm. The Reich play will play into that quite nicely. I still see that Podio will continue to grow as this custom niche where Reich doesn't fit or this doesn't fit. I think that it will continue to fit here, but I can see a time where an investor group's going to look at it saying, look, let's start using these, let's start consolidating these automation programs, right? Let's start, we've got this TECHego that is the best of the best. Let's start merging these two together. However, the beauty of that, I think, not the beauty, I think GlobiFlow carries so much weight and so many actions. They know, investor groups are going to know that that's not something that's going to be easily replaced. So they may continue to keep this separate. And if it's that big of a thing, like we can't integrate Podio with this stuff. We can't continue to integrate. There's no way for us to do that. Then they may, maybe they'll spin it off, but who knows?
Damien?
I'm kind of in the same boat. It's like on the one hand, we are seeing a lot of recent improvements. I don't know if that was just because all the, like the talks and everything were going on long before the actual acquisition, but it is nice to see some things actually happening. But like Seth's saying, like it's kind of an unknown right now. Are they going to continue to allow us to do these things, or is it going to be like, hey, consolidate all your stuff? Like now we're going this route. So
I can't see them I can't see a situation in the next 5 years where Citrix just kills Podio off.
Yeah, doesn't make sense.
But it would be a brand. It would be from a brand publicity point of view. You've got, I don't know how many millions of people use Podio now, but the
billions of GlobiFlow actions a month.
Yeah, and the revenue the revenue that Podio makes a couple of years ago was making around 28 million a year. I gotta believe it's making more than that now. I gotta believe it's making, and the relative cost of what Podio costs to Citrix is, it's got to be a pretty profitable exercise because they don't have that many people involved with it.
In 2014, they were only making about $700,000 a month. So they've had a huge growth spike. It's a beautiful story of why to keep it going. I do hope that they do try to keep it more of an enterprise level thing. But my gut kind of tells me, I don't know if not workflow automation, but I don't know if what they've been creating, workspace is something that's going to be around for a really long time because it's still so new and it's so difficult to integrate with. I don't know that that's something that's going to be adopted or.
Are you using Podio with CallRail? There's a better way. Click the link, find out why hundreds of businesses have moved over to using smartphone, the only phone system built for Podio. Make more calls, send more texts, and close more deals. Click the link.
I'm not sure. It does seem like at the same time, workspace, it does seem at the same time to be Citrix's hottest card in their hand, but also the best kept secret in terms of how it can be developed, right? Because I think we all have the perspective that Podio by itself, without GlobiFlow, without that automation engine that is within arm's reach for most people to do basic core automations. We obviously hacked the shit out of GlobiFlow to make it do a lot of things that perhaps it wasn't really meant to do up front, but it can do them. That's the magic of the application that Andreas originally built. But without that, it's just a static database, right? We talked at the partner meeting about this other app that this gentleman came to me from. It's called Tape. He pretends to be the next Podio, right? That's the first thing you see when you go to his website. So I'm like, all the best to you, but at the same time, without an API, without that piece, without the way to automate anything, it's already dead in the water. So I have high hopes for that team to look at those shortcomings, and without GlobiFlow involved, Podio would disappear. And the thing about Workspace is, like, they've put so much stock into it, even the limited people who are developing with it. If Podio was meant to be a source of truth for Workspace, and why not? Because they would speak quite well to each other. They're both Citrix products. There's an opportunity for billing on both fronts for Citrix. Use Podio. I've heard nothing but conversation about how Workspace is supposed to work well with Podio. But if Podio continues to do what it's doing, then why would they put themselves in the position of taking their star pupil and putting it on top of something that's just not ready for it? So I want to believe that means that Podio is there for the long term, and they have high hopes in keeping it running well and making it run better so that Workspace can survive. This is the first time I've actually heard words spoken that maybe Workspace is not what they expect it to be. Maybe it was just a marketing thing. I don't know.
The uptake, from what I understand, the uptake on Workspace has been not what they had hoped and what they had expected. I think partially that's down to they launched it and some of the more advanced capabilities weren't live. So essentially you were spending money on something which really didn't do much, like comparatively didn't do much. I think, the one positive as well, I would say, I think we all believe and hope that Podio will continue to thrive. I certainly believe it's in its best position it's been for a while now. And I will tell you, I had reached out by someone, one of the sales guys in Citrix, who I used to do a lot of work with. He along with everybody else got taken off of selling Podio. Citrix basically took their entire sales teams and stopped selling Podio. And then put it to just one salesperson, who we all know who that is. But he contacted me the other day and said, "Hey, guess what? We're going to be starting to sell Podio again."
That's fantastic.
And I was not expecting that. And he reached out and said that. So, I think the future is relatively good right now. And if they can continue, barring any massive fuck up, because when something like this happens with the acquisition, they may have their own ideas. If they're a massive activist investor type, if they've got ideas to chop it up and sell off the parts or something, I don't know what their desire of. There could be an unknown with the investor group, but for where Podio is right now, it seems to be in a relatively decent position, and we're actually seeing movement again, which I think is great.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
We'll see. All right, guys. Well, listen, thank you. As always, it's a pleasure to have a little partner get together, and get back into the podcast. We'll be doing, this will be one of the first podcasts we launch of season 5. There'll be some new ones coming up, including, I think, Damien's coming on by himself with one of his customers to talk more about his ecosystem. Seth's going to come along to talk about some of his products and update us on where they are, because these are all amazing kind of products that if you're using Podio, you need to look at, and ecosystems you need to live in. So we'll be seeing these guys and Andrew, I'm sure, again, very soon. And thank you guys for joining me on this week's episode of Supercharged.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
You've been listening to another awesome episode of Supercharged with Jordan Samuel Fleming. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to be notified of new podcast episodes, Podio masterclasses, and in-depth Podio extension reviews. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give us a review on your podcast player to help support the show.